Jordan Bianchi, The Athletic. Got any conversations with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. this week or this weekend?
No. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not sure what I would say, right? There's nothing that really would change it, right? We've already had that conversation. I feel like we have a good relationship, or had one, right? It was just running behind him, just kind of logging laps, and just locked up in a very dumb spot, and it was just so dumb, really, and just a mistake that didn't need to happen and didn't want it to happen, and but there's nothing that I could do or say. I can't go buy him a Hallmark card and really make things better. So which sucks. It sucks for me because he's the only NASCAR driver that owns a sprint car team, and I love sprint cars. So it sucks because I want to go talk to him about a sprint car team. So hopefully everything can be set. But I know the scorecard has me ahead right now, unfortunately.
Zach Sterniolo, NASCAR.com. Carson, how do you put your name's been out there for a couple of weeks in a row now. Some good, like Michigan, despite the result, but then obviously the Nashville and Mexico City stuff now. How do you put that behind you and keep your perspective and focus on the job at hand when you have to get behind the wheel?
Yeah, I mean, number one, we're here at a racetrack, so we just go racing, right? I mean, the scorecard, right, has it that I'm getting something from the 47 at some point, right? And I think my team and everybody kind of knows that. But at the same time, it's ideally just the 47, right? It's not a open hunting season on the 77 because of these incidents. It's kind of oscillated to, when the 47, has a moment that he wants to, take at us or take a shot, right? It's just okay, that's probably fair. But with everybody else, they've, my team has reassured me that, this isn't open hunting season, right? We are going to race like we've raced. Let's just not create more enemies that we start getting shots back at us. But, we're still just gonna race and, be aggressive and defend ourselves when we need to. But, this is kind of unfortunately, now 2-0 scorecard. I've been a fan of this sport for a long time. The game and you've seen it and everything. So, but we just go racing.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. You're right, Carson. When you talk about, what the scorecard is with the 47. Does that mean if he does something and it ends your race that's part of it, and that's I don't know if the word is acceptable in this situation?
Well, I'm hoping. We're really fast here. I'm hoping he's artistic about it, that I don't hit anything. But yeah, just ultimately, right? It could be tomorrow, or it could be 6 months from now, right? It'll be, you can't. It would be very hypocritical for me to then lose my mind and be frustrated. It wasn't just okay. I've been a fan for a very long time, right? You've seen these, stories before. It's not by no means the first time. So, hopefully, for my sake, it doesn't happen, and we could race, and if I need to, we can point him by or whatever. But I know how frustrated I was even that I brought this back up because I thought we were good, and I let him go even because I was a lap down or whatever, and I was just riding behind him, and then I locked up. So you live in the world you make for yourself, and this is the world I've made.
And you reference that, just you live in the world that you make. In the last year, you had some great finishes and performances, but you've also accrued $100,000 in fines for separate incidents. It upset some drivers, which, in some cases that's not always a bad thing. I understand that. How do you look at what you need to do moving forward to be, whether it's a better you or a better driver, or if you feel like, hey, I'm doing the right things and I'm just kind of being misunderstood in some situations?
Well, I think there's a bigger thing, or maybe the perception that, you make these mistakes, and, for me, like, that I don't care. Like, I'm just like, oh, cool, whatever, what's a fine, or what's this, or what's this, I'll never get anything back. It's good. I'm very hard on myself. When I qualified second, I'm just cussing myself out, basically. So when I do something really dumb or hit somebody, right, like, people just don't see that, right? Because, you just go to your hotel room and you bang your head against the wall, basically. But it's, I'm, just because I do something in the heat of the moment doesn't mean, or maybe, you do it 2 or 3 times, but it's across some time, that, I'm not hard on myself for those mistakes, because they are mistakes. It's just trying not to make that a pattern. But, when you're constantly making aggressive moves like we're doing, it's just balancing that fine line of, you make 1,000 moves a day. Just unfortunately, what, people remember isn't always the good ones. You always remember the negative ones. So that's just trying to limit the negative ones a lot more.
Do you feel like you've created a pattern for the garage, or is that more presenting?
I think, like what I already have that image, right? Like, it'll never go away. I could go 3 years from now, right? Like, and it, it's just like, oh, I'm back, per se. I think I already made that image before I got in this garage, right? And I think it's just trying to balance one thing of owning it and trying to change the narrative while still being like, yeah, I get it. Like, I'm aware of this, right? And knowing that.
Samuel Stubbs, yardbarker.com. Carson, if you and Ricky are around each other tomorrow, should you find yourselves racing each other, are you going to give him a wider berth than you would normally?
Probably.
And then you mentioned you've seen these scenarios play out before, just as a fan. With everything going on for you on the track with good finishes, but also some off-track stuff, making some guys in the garage maybe a little unhappy, do you see it as an example of a young driver kind of taking your licks as you try to grow and mature?
Jesus. Yeah. Maybe so. I think the biggest thing for me, I've just been a fan for, forever, right? And you always saw the rookie get pushed around and, just kind of have to pay their dues. And, I was just like, man, if I'm ever in that spot, I'm never going to get pushed around, or, man, like, that's how you lose opportunities of races. You never know how long you're going to be in the garage for one. You never know how long, none of us, have a, shot clock waiting on us. You never know. So for me, like, I want to take advantage of every opportunity I have out there, and have no regrets of the effort I put in, and maybe at times instead of just not letting myself get pushed over, I'm trying to push other people over, and that was the wrong mindset or wrong decision at times. But the biggest thing for me was just I didn't want to leave anything on the racetrack that that I would, looking back long after, I could have won here, or we could have ran really good here, or maybe my career would have been differently if I came out of the gate as good as we did, because I lost the opportunity, and then, who knows. But, as long as I was just putting 100%, I wouldn't have any regrets on how anything turned out. So, just sometimes when you're going 110, that's sometimes where you're like, I didn't really need to do that part.